super stoked to have you here, man.
I'm super excited. Been following you for a while now. And, Adam's like, we got to get on that podcast. I'm like, I don't know, make it happen. Huh? I'm always game.
He hit me probably a couple of weeks ago, and we put it together really fast. And you were actually supposed to be here a week ago. Mm-hmm. And I was super disappointed. It didn't happen a week ago because of the whole airline computer crash thing. Everybody was going down. I had somebody actually flying out. They were on Southwest, and apparently they use like an analog system. So no problems for them.
They had a 22 or 23-year-old system backing like the new system. So like they were still not affected.
Totally fine.
I fly Delta because I fly so much now that it's like I try to fly stay one primarily.
Yeah.
And they have more routes West Coast to East Coast and like later flights like red eyes.
Yep.
And for me, like I'm gone a ton. I want to get home to my family. If I got to fly out Friday morning instead of Thursday night,
right,
I miss all day Friday because I'm traveling. Where if I fly Thursday night, I can sleep on the plane and then be home Friday,
I used to do this. I used to actually fly to the East Coast. When I worked for a large company, I had all the southeastern seaboard. So it was like Texas over to Florida and then up to North Carolina. But mostly a lot of my work on that seaboard was like Georgia. And man, like that became a thing because they were always looking for like the cheapest flight.
Right.
Which meant it could be American one week, Southwest the next, or Delta. Actually, flying Delta was always good because I could almost get there in one shot.
Yeah, especially from Georgia because Atlanta's their biggest hub.
Exactly. Anyways, thanks for making it out, man.
Yeah, I apologize last week. I was at the airport, but windows crashed. Delta out there, everything was grounded, and it was like.
Again, when I say disappointed, it's only because I was super excited to have this conversation because I've talked to so many people lately in the combative space, which we're going to get into, and in EFC and what they're doing. But I've been following what EFT, Effective Fitness Training, and EFC, Effective Fitness Combatives, have been doing now for basically since, EFC is a little newer, but EFT since it jumped into the game, or since I jumped into this game. And then I've also had Joey from Police Post Training on the show before too, who handles another page or a part of kind of what the whole EFT, I guess, system does. So this has been a long time coming for me because I would have reached out earlier if I thought I understood the world that you work in a little bit more. And I was a little intimidated by it. It's a little mysterious to me. Okay. I mean, you can kind of see what's going on, in body-worn camera footage and wrestling matches that happen between officers and suspects or anything for that matter. But you specifically put out a ton of content, and it allows for somebody to be able to study that content and maybe try and put the pieces together. And I don't have a lot of experience in BJJ, and I see a lot of people maybe trying to say that what cops need is BJJ. And what I see you doing isn't BJJ. There's some stuff that crosses over, and I've been trying to understand what are the things that are different about what EFC is doing, because it seems to me the business has taken off, which is cool. I want to talk about it. I know I'm doing a lot of talking right now, but what I want to dig into is exactly what are you guys doing and how are you doing it? How do you develop the stuff that you're doing? So anyway, before we do that, let's talk about you. You got a history as a law enforcement officer, and then you're obviously doing this full time now. So you get to take me back. And then let's try to get caught up. And you can start wherever you want, finish wherever you want. As I tell this to everybody, you just have to be patient with me because I'll probably stop you and interrupt you with questions. All right, ready, set, go. It's on you.
Yeah, I was always just a very competitive, athletic kid. Went to college originally to be an attorney, which is kind of crazy.
Really?
Because I couldn't see myself being an attorney now.
Is this in the family tree somewhere?
No, not at all. Like my dad was a military guy. He got out of the military. He was a baker. He was like a bakery manager. And then when the store closed and went out of business, he ended up finishing his career as a maintenance person at a hospital. We didn't come from a whole lot of money. Like everyone thought we had money just because like my mom did a lot of like garage sales at like high end like houses. So we dressed like the rich kids, but we weren't rich by no means.
Wow.
My dad wouldn't even be able to give us money, like spending money, but he was super hard-nosed, that military guy, and he was always like, I can't give you money, but I help you earn your money. So I think my work ethic started from there,
Gotcha.
Right? From dad. So it's like, hey, at 8, 10 years old, go see if you can get some lawns to mow at 8 and 10 in the neighborhood. And we would. And then so he would do the push mowing and the weed whacking and let us drive the tractor. And then as we got older, we were doing the push mowing and weed whacking. He was driving the tractor. But again, it was that paper routes, and we'd get paper routes and do paper routes every night.
Yeah.
Well, we were playing sports too. So guess who did the paper routes when we were doing sports?
Wow.
Dad. And he would also, be working his full-time job at the time. He worked until he was 70, retired. He probably still be working now. He's 83. But he had a seizure. And so he ended up retiring. But we still find him like up on ladders, painting his house. Like
I hate that
he was
stuff,
mowing
man.
other people's lawns until 2 years ago.
That's crazy. Yeah, like I told my mom and my dad, I said, if I come over here and that ladder doesn't have dust on it, I'm going to be upset. Like, I'm going to take all the ladders out. You guys are not allowed to get up on those anymore. But I recognize my dad's the same way. Like, he's always tinkering with something. He's always doing something, keeping himself busy.
And so I think the work ethic comes from there. I have a lot of energy and pretty high energy. So that helps me as far as like, I think instructing wise and passion wise is like always wanting to be the best or to learn and be better all the time. Went to college, played soccer, got out, and during college realized like I don't want to be an attorney realistically because I don't want to go to school for any longer than 4 years.
Yeah. It's seemingly the rest of your life. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a cop. It was just, this looks
on
cool.
a whim.
On a whim. This is cool. I'll be a cop. They don't sit in an office. They do different things every day. I did a couple ride-alongs. My first ever police ride-along was with a guy named Dan Forsberg, who when I retired actually was like in charge of the drug unit for the sheriff's office, and we worked real close together. So it's kind of cool. So like my first ride-along guy was actually like one of the guys that inspired me to go. Ended up, he wasn't my boss, but like we worked closely together, and he was overseeing the unit that we worked closely with too.
Where is this in the world?
In Western New York.
Gotcha.
So like just south of Buffalo.
Got it.
And so I became a police officer, went to the academy. I didn't know how to fight. I wrestled till 8th grade. I was pretty good in soccer. So my mother and father let me play like club soccer, and I'd play travel. And so like I played no other sports in high school, basically till my senior year. I played soccer and football because I was the kicker. But I realistically played no other sports in high school besides just soccer. And so I quit wrestling, which is one of the main things that like, if I could go back and change anything, I wouldn't have quit wrestling in high school. That's the one thing I would change.
I would have kept wrestling and not done football in college. I would have wrestled in college.
Yeah, for sure. 100%.
Even at just junior college. Not that I would have gotten a scholarship or anything for it, but I would have kept doing it. I loved it.
Yeah. So when I got out, I went to the academy and I became a cop. And I had an incident where I had a guy probably your size that was extremely intoxicated, and it was a DWI, and I was running through it, and it was a resisting arrest, and my backup was a little bit away, and I was like, it's a good thing this guy's drunk and can barely stand, because I don't really know how to fight. This guy doesn't know how to fight, thank God, but he's bigger than me, and he's stronger than me. And so I was like, I gotta learn how to fight. So I tried to find some jiu-jitsu places locally, and Western New York was not a hotbed for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask just a quick check in here. When is this in terms of like timing on the chronological timeline?
2001-ish.
Okay. So BJJ at that particular time is it's just kind of coming on. People are starting to, they've been watching it through the late 90s in the octagon, if you will, but it's still pretty misunderstood. So
we were driving 5 to 6 hours once a month, once every 6 weeks to do seminars, and then coming back and just getting like, hey, finding some good wrestlers. And where we are in Western New York is right next to PA, and it's a hotbed of wrestlers. Like the wrestling there is solid. And just getting together and basically fighting, like sparring, standing up, sparring, fighting, doing jiu-jitsu and wrestling. Just a group of guys from the department? Some of the guys from the department, and then just some local people that I knew from like the wrestling community. Got it. And bringing them in and
no, I just mean the guys that you were driving 5 or 6 hours with.
It would vary.
Got it.
Mostly not in the department to start. Right. And then
so this is just a journey all on your own to start. To fulfill this thing. Sure. Okay, got it.
And then there was a brown belt that lived in Jamestown, but was teaching out of Buffalo. And some guy, everyone pretty much in Western New York started under him. And then everyone kind of branched out in their own ways. But that's kind of where the jiu-jitsu aspect of things started.
Okay.
Training wise for like the police department was like, I saw this, like I went to PPCT instructor in 2003 or 2004 and was like, this is awful. There's
a gap here. Yeah.
There's a gap here. Right. And so I was like, something's gotta be. So I started integrating like some wrestling and jiu-jitsu fundamentals into police work. And again, when I started doing that, I did it wrong. I did too much off our back stuff. I was like, jiu-jitsu. And that's important. If I go to my back,
you want to know how to be.
And I have a dude on top of me and I'm on concrete gravel and I got a gun belt on and he can assault me, I need to know how to get up or get on top. I have to. I can do that with jiu-jitsu and wrestling or a combination of both. Getting buy-in from people, again, is very difficult for guys that have never been put on their back in police work, that don't want to change. Why am I doing this? I've never been here before.
So you were trying to do this and they were going, no.
Right. It was very hard to get people to want to train it and do it.
Okay, now I get it. Okay.
In the private side, my private life, I was fighting amateur MMA. I was doing jiu-jitsu still, ranking. And then I finally was like, okay, how do I get this integrated in the police department more? Started doing, our department wasn't really on board a lot at that point. It's still fairly early. And so I started doing like jiu-jitsu for police seminars at some gyms. My buddy's gym in Buffalo, my buddy's gym here, my buddy's gym there. And then we had a change of administration. And the guy that was the SWAT team commander at the time was a 20-year military guy as well, and was a big avid wrestler. And he said, let's change this.
It's just always one. It's always a person. It's always the humans that make this happen.
Yep.
It's not a policy.
Correct.
So
we changed it. And again, in the beginning, it was a little bit too much jiu-jitsu-y. I started getting contacts at like the tactical conferences and then started teaching there. But again, I was still teaching like a lot more jiu-jitsu than I was other fundamentals as far as like wrestling, striking. It was more like just straight up jiu-jitsu for like from the bottom. And where I really saw the change was when I thought about this and was like, what do we do overwhelmingly when we use force in police work? It's one person taking the guy down, controlling him, or multiple people taking a guy down and controlling them. So if we want to be better at our profession, we need to affect what we do the most in our uses of force to start. So I really started concentrating on building a system of how to train controlling a person, taking them down, one person, and then adding in 2, 3, and 4 officers.
So I hear people get a little bit nervous around or anxious around that term system. And so when you say it, can you elaborate on that just a little bit? And is it more like I was teaching a system of how to teach it, not this is how you solve the problem or every problem, or was it a little bit of both? What can you tell me here?
Both.
Okay.
So a system is in far as, hey, here's the over-rooted principles. So I use 5 principles, for instance.
Okay, I'm with you.
And you might do a takedown differently than I do. But if it doesn't violate a principle and the concepts of a takedown aren't violated, that's okay.
Yeah, that's a clear distinction I want to get to. Yeah.
Okay, so, and understand, basically what a system is if you think about it, your grappling style can be different than mine, but we might still have a systematic approach. And I think that's why New Wave is so good. That's why the New Wave guys are so good. They're super strict to a system. And all that is everything you do comes full circle. So no matter where I'm at, any of my skills or concepts are going to be available. I just got to figure out the route I'm using them in.
It's a workflow.
It's a workflow. Okay. So started teaching that, and man, that was a game changer because everyone was buying in. Even the old guys at the department that didn't want to buy in realized, hey, these guys don't train jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and they're being effective on the street arresting guys that are bigger,
they're not wrong.
Because they're going places. And so then once I got the buy-in in the department, other departments were starting to buy in, and eventually I was begging the academy director to like reach out to the state. And because at that time you had to submit a 40-hour curriculum that the state was saying you had to do. You could do anything above that, but you had to teach this minimum curriculum. And again, it was pretty poor. Okay. So it eventually comes to the point where the the Post in New York DCGS reached out to the academy director, who was a friend of mine, and said, hey, do you think Jay would be interested in being on this panel? We're looking at revamping the state curriculum.
Sign me up.
And he's like, I can tell you yes, because he's been hounding me for years already on this. So that's kind of where it started for the state. There was a panel of us, and then it ended up being, and so New York State's a little bit weird. There's DCGS covers all zone academies, minus state police and NYPD. They govern themselves.
Okay.
So basically, I developed a curriculum for DCGS that covered all zone academies. So every police department in the state of New York, minus NYPD and New York State Police. The good thing is New York State Police had one of my mentors who actually, Rob Hughes is his name. He was a black belt like when I started training, and he's a cop. He was actually one of Julio's first American black belts. And so they were still doing the same thing of like high-low contact, like low anchors, top guy stuff. And you know, I've just like broken down and detailed out a few routes from each position a little bit more in depth since then. And that's where it's just taken off.
But fundamentally, it's...
Fundamentally. So where we scare law enforcement professionals with when we say jiu-jitsu for police is these guys don't want to come in and do arm bars and triangles and do jiu-jitsu. And I don't blame them, because they're not actually doing submissions, and that's not their goal set. It's like, hey, what is gi rules versus no gi rules? There's different rules. Mm-hmm. They have different outcomes. So certain things like they might not they may not go to honey hole, because in honey hole, there are limited options in gi because they can't heel hook or reap, where in no gi, they can finish with a heel hook and reap, and there's more outcomes there. So in police work, our outcome is control and then custody. Mm-hmm. It's not submit this guy.
It's very different.
It's not submit this guy. Mm-hmm. Realistically, I can choke somebody out and submit them way easier than I can get two hands behind your back, control them, get a tool out, and cuff them.
So this is what I realized going back to my diatribe at the beginning before allowing you to have this interview. But it was about what I was watching happening, and that there's some utilization of some techniques or some concepts to get to a certain point, but at a certain point it has to be very different, because you mentioned a word there was like, number one, well, there's goals. There's an outcome that we're looking for here, and that is custody, which generally means somebody's in handcuffs, if we're, correct, to break it down very simply. And there's a lot of people listen to the show that maybe aren't so in tune to this, and so this is my dumb way of explaining it. Again, the way I was looking at it. So there's an outcome that we're looking for. The second thing or word that you used there was there's rules here, right?
Yeah,
like there are laws. There are so many. You may look at this as like a rules of engagement type of process that a law enforcement officer has to follow, and not following that can mean all kinds of different things, none of which are good generally in terms of their personal safety, their professional, career, and all, and for the let's say the suspect that's involved. And I think that whole like, hey, if cops just did more BJJ, then we wouldn't see so much of this happening. To an extent, I think. For sure, to an extent, but there are these other pieces that need to be put into it, and that's what I was kind of watching happening. Again, maybe not completely understanding it, but that's what I hope to maybe walk through today, because that rules piece is something I think people forget about, the outside onlooker who doesn't understand this, and also understanding that the rules are not the same across the board, not county to county, even state to state or city to city.
Department to department.
Yeah, it's wild. So, like, how are you navigating that is one of the questions I have. I don't know if we answer it now or later, but.
Yeah, for sure. Let's just do it now. So first and foremost, you have your Fourth Amendment, right? Search and seizure. A seizure is if I'm going to take you into custody, I'm seizing you. I'm seizing that person. So what is the government interest versus what is the amendment? What is your right versus what is the government interest there? I have to have a reason, or at least reasonable suspicion of why I'm taking you into custody. Okay. Now, under that comes, again, you're going to have state law and case law. So now you can have state law. So here in California, it's 835A is a state law for like when to use deadly physical force. Mm-hmm. And in New York, it's Article 35. So those vary a little bit. Now, California and New York are usually always pretty similar because they're both more, I would say, on the liberal side of things. So they usually would be different than like Florida and Texas as far as like their laws per se, right?
I don't think it's going to be a surprise to people.
And it's not a surprise. So like understanding that could change from state to state. Your state law could change from state to state. Then you have case law. Case law is when it goes to your circuit courts, your court decisions, and they make a decision on one of those laws or that use of force. That restricts us. Then you have your circuit court decisions. Then from there you go to, all right, what's your agency policy? That restricts people more than anything else.
Oh, interesting.
I see more people get jammed up for violating agency policy than they do for, like, say, violating a state law. So understanding that could vary from department to department. I can't go and train everybody on their general orders. There's just too many of them. So you have to understand, like, hey, you guys are responsible for knowing case law. You're responsible for knowing your state laws, okay? And you're have to know what your general orders are. And in the end, be a good person. Like, sometimes in the end, it's be a good person.
Yeah, I got that. I got that.
Like, do the right thing, be a good person. And we're putting out the content. We are giving you the best ways to verbally de-escalate, de-escalate with presence, de-escalate with tactics and control. There's a big misunderstanding that de-escalation is only verbal. But listen, if you and I are having a conversation, and whether it's the cop or the bad guy or the suspect that chooses not to verbally de-escalate,
it's an agreement.
It's an agreement. And that doesn't always happen.
Right.
We can try. We should try. But there's sometimes where we don't come in at the verbal de-escalation level. We may come in and it's automatically at the deadly physical force, or it's at a higher level, and we don't have that verbal de-escalation. But we got to continue that dialogue and that narrative with these people as well. Verbal commands is super important to what we do. And we train. We make it specific that you guys need to train your verbal commands when you're doing this, because that is super important. Yes, you have a body cam on, but your body cam at the angle it's not like one of these cool GoPro.
Right, where you're picking it all up, yeah.
No, it's one angle. It's an electronic device. It has no feelings. So now your verbal commands are just as important. What's the suspect's actions versus what are you trying to get him to do? And that could change throughout the thing. And we have to continue to keep that dialogue with the suspect the entire way through the sequence. Now, if I have really good hands-on tactics or control tactics and verbal de-escalation fails and I need to go hands-on with you, and my teammate and I are really good at going high-low, we're good at controlling you, and we get you into custody, and we just had to take you down, control you, and get you into custody, we de-escalated with good tactics, good control tactics. If we didn't have good control tactics and you started to fight, that might escalate up even further.
Takes it to whatever that person has in their pocket.
Correct. Right. Yeah. So now say, like, you present a weapon and it's a knife, and we're good at moving out of the clinch, or we're already have good tactics and we're keeping distance and using a barricade, we may have more options available to us because our tactics were good. That's a form of de-escalation at the highest level. So de-escalation is across the board, and you can't just teach de-escalation at the verbal level. De-escalation is at all sorts of tactics and skills.
What's the reality of what officers are getting in regard to de-escalation and what you just explained there across the board?
I think the big shortcoming is we need to train these guys in verbal de-escalation. Be better at verbal de-escalation.
Really? Okay.
And so when that fails, then what do we do?
Yeah, there has to be an answer.
This comes back to, let's go to taser reliance.
Okay.
Their over-reliance on tasers, or just say tools. Okay. We know in police work, if we use force, the overwhelming majority of the time it's hands-on.
Okay.
So if we're relying on tools and our hands-on skills are not good, say our hands-on skills actually are terrible or they suck, we're going to rely on those tools way faster or more often.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when those tools fail,
or I suck at those,
then I might escalate faster to deadly physical force than I would if I had good tactics below that. Right? So understanding they all go hand in hand. But in our profession, we should not be tool dependent. We should be hands-on skills dependent, and then our tools support those skills.
Gotcha.
Because in an environment, in a profession where we go hands-on for use of force more than anything else that we use force-wise, we need to be really good there. And there's just no training there.
So that's where I was going with that, because you did a really great job of explaining that for my my very small brain. And that is what I heard you say, just to confirm, is that the most important thing they learn is the verbal de-escalation to start.
Yep.
But they also have to be prepared what happens when that doesn't work. Because the reality of the situation is, and we see it every day, all day, that it often doesn't work. No matter that person has decided, I'm not going to agree to this today, that suspect or whatever is agreed. Whether it's because the situation was handled poorly, by the officer that's there, or something else happened way outside of his or her control, and this is just what's happening, or that person just decides, nope, not doing it. I've made up my mind. We're going a different direction. I don't know where that's going to go yet. You have to assess that as officer. Now you're moving into your potential hands-on stuff before the tool comes out.
Yeah, as long as there's no other articulable facts of where I should be going to something else.
He's reaching
higher.
for the waistband, whatever the case, goes into the 45, 90 degree at the elbow kind of thing.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not always just the suspect. For the most part, sure, it's the suspects failing to be verbally us to de-escalate them. Mm-hmm. But we've all worked with people that they're going through a divorce, they're having a bad day, and that's a cop that day, and he comes in and he's just not, he's not at the point where he's going to put up with anything.
Or he's going from 0 to 60
he's going from 0 to 60 right away. So maybe it fails because of that situation. No matter how it fails, the next level of de-escalation is going to be good control tactics or overall good tactics. And I've been using this formula because this kind of gets people to understand why we call it combatives versus defensive tactics, control tactics, whatever it might be.
Gotcha.
We're not always defensive. Sometimes we have to be offensive first, though. But in the world of police work, we are not always controlling that person. We may be controlling him in a different way, but physically hands-on are not always controlling him. Okay? So we talk about distance. What's distance give us?
It's just some time.
Time.
Right.
Okay, so especially in weapons, especially in stuff, we'll say distance. Get distance, because distance gives us time. So if we're looking at mathematical equations, we take distance plus time.
Love this.
Equals some sort of result. Mm-hmm. If I have distance and I have time, I have more solutions, better critical decisions under stress, and possibly more options. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what happens if I don't have distance? So the rest of my equation is the same. I want it to equal. I want the most solutions. I want the best decisions under stress. And I want to be able to go what we call preclusion, is like, hey, I have time, or everything's failed up into this, and these are my decisions.
Now I can move down the list, the checklist here.
Yes. So we're taking distance out. So if I have an equation, it would be like where your X is plus time equals critical decision under stress, better solutions, more options. Mm-hmm. What replaces that X if I don't have distance?
Your options get less.
So if I'm close and I can control you, now control gives me time. So if I start fighting with you and you're pulling away and I don't know how to control you, and I grab your arm and you're pulling away and flailing away.
We're on the clock.
We're on the clock, and I have no control over you, and I don't know how to control you. Right? Now fear setting in. Mm-hmm. So if I can control you, that gives me time, which then gives me more options, better decisions under stress, get on the radio, get more people here, wear him out. But I'm in a good position. I am in a good position. So we say principle 3 in EFC is distance management. Mm. Distance management is a double-edged sword. I can engage you or I can disengage you. If I disengage you, I want to create distance. If I engage you, I need to control you.
You're also I'm just looking at the other side of the line here, and you're also giving the suspect those things too.
Correct.
If you disengage or you give them time and distance,
yes,
they have choices as well.
Correct.
Right? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm looking at it all, and you have to know that based on the decision that you've made.
And multiple factors play into that.
Yeah,
and multiple skills play into that, and multiple factors as far as size and strength.
Sure.
Size and strength makes a difference. To say it doesn't, you're just uneducated in fighting. Okay. If you and I go in the weight room, you're lifting more than me. Okay. If you and I had the same skill level, our skill level is in the same ballpark, size and strength makes a difference. Mm-hmm. You don't see the 141-pound national champion wrestling the heavyweight champion. Why?
It's the obvious reason.
Because they're both super skilled in size and strength's most likely going to win every time.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu is a little bit different. Their thought process is different, and it shouldn't be anymore. In the beginning, yes, nobody knew jiu-jitsu. So the smaller guy would use leverage against the big guy to manipulate him.
Right. It was impressive as hell.
Okay.
Yeah. Until
the big guy
got the skills,
learns how to do jiu-jitsu.
Right.
So if our skills in the same ballpark, then size and strength and attributes 100% are going to make a difference.
So when we go back to the control piece and that being very important, what is strength? Is strength the number one there with control, or does it start something else?
No, I think it's going to be like the philosophy of where I'm controlling.
Okay.
So like, I'm going to control you in two spots. I'm going to be stuck inside you.
Okay.
And if I'm stuck inside you, now my underhooks, inside head position, body locks, all that stuff are going to come into play.
Yep.
If I'm outside you, I want to beat the elbow, which gives me an angle, and I'm in 2-on-1s, body locks from the back, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. Once we hit the ground, we utilize numerous different positions depending on where they're at.
Sure.
Okay. So let's say when they hit the ground in police work, suspects usually do three things, or there's three positions that we have to solve problems from. Stomach up, they're on their back.
Mm-hmm.
On their side, like in a fetal position, very common. Stomach down.
We've all seen this.
And stomach down problems there's more stomach down problems to have to solve than the other ones. So let's say stomach up first. If they're stomach up, we teach a knee or shin on top of the hips, near side arm control.
Gotcha.
Winning the angle, again, beating the elbow. Having good control, but the ability to disengage if needed.
Get out of there.
Or we use a leg drag position. Again, we can disengage if needed. And because when it comes down to size and strength, we're teaching to the competent level cop.
Got it.
He might not be a blue belt. He might not be a black belt like myself or somebody else. So if I put someone that's not skilled as a cop, and let's just say 150-pound police officer that's a male, and I put him on top of you, and I put him in the mount position, which is a dominant control position, you can connect to him better. And if you connect to him and get a bridge and roll, we see this all the time. Now I went from top to bottom. So I'm limiting his ability to disengage or transition. Okay. Can skill change that? It certainly can change that. But I'll tell you what, even as a black belt, I've gotten reversed by other black belts that are much larger than me because they off balance me. Maybe they trap my arm and then they reverse the position. And now I'm playing guard. That's okay in jiu-jitsu. That's neutral.
Yep.
But now in police work, now I'm on my back on some sort of surface I don't like with a big dude on top of me.
It's wearing a vest, wearing a bunch of gear.
So we stick to those primary positions because it fits principle 3.
Gotcha.
And principle 2, which is we always need to give our officers the ability to get mobile again. Movement is life in police work. We have to get mobile and move, especially if weapons are introduced or size difference.
Movement is life. That's what you just said.
Movement is life.
Okay? I love that.
I can't expect a 140-pound person to arrest you if you don't want to be arrested hands-on.
Well, we see this all the time. Where you've got what looks like a capable police officer, right? And you got this little 140-pound wiry dude who isn't going to jail today. He's already decided that. And it's like, it's wild. It's
and they just don't know how to understand the control there. Because if it's different, if I have a larger officer and a smaller person that doesn't train, they should be able to.
So that's my thing is like, where does the strength piece, the control, the strength in the control meet the tactics in the control?
Yeah. So like say now they're stomach down. The most dangerous thing they do stomach down besides try to present a weapon is build a base to get to all fours. Because now they can stand, they can present weapons more, so on and so forth. We talk about stomach down issues. Hey, if they put their arms out to push up and create space to build a base, because most people can't actually build a base with someone on top of them. But people can. How do we extract arms?
Yeah,
I always tell people
this is the thing we see all the time. It's just like they've got them there, but they can't do anything from there.
It's a formula again. What do I need to do to extract arms?
You can't get up without your arms.
I got to control him first. Right. Okay. And if I reach over the top and try to pull your arm back, you're strong there. It's your chest, your back muscles, so on and so forth. So I have to win inside control. That's like an underhook from the back. We use 2 grips. We want A grip, which is the pinky line or the meaty line of the hand. That's your preferred grip. Or B, going to the wrist. Then to extract your hand, I need to take your elbow over your hand before I pull it out.
It's rotation at the shoulder.
Correct. If I'm trying to pull it to a 90, I'm fighting your back and your chest. Just not going to happen.
You're not going to win.
I have to defeat the structure of your shoulder first, right? I'm going to take you and put you where your anatomy is most compromised or weakest, and then I extract the arm.
You're going to leverage the hell out of it.
So the two shortcomings in extractions are, one, we try to pull two arms at the same time. That comes back to push-pull, okay? If you and I stand in front of each other and we try to push each other, you're winning. You're beating me. If we try to grab hold of each other and we do a tug of war and we pull, you're beating me. So if you're pulling an arm and I'm pulling an arm, we're just working against each other. So we always say we work one arm at a time. You can control the arm, but we extract one arm at a time. That's important. I have to inside control, and I have to also stabilize the head. And then I unwind the shoulder. Then I pull the arm back. I don't pull the arm back until I have all three. Because if I pull the arm back before that,
starts it all over again.
It starts it all over again.
You're just right back to the top.
The reason the head control is important is because if I unwind his elbow and his head's pinned, that's the counter pressure. He can't get his elbow back. But if he can lift his head up, his elbow comes
with it.
So his elbow unwinds. So we walk them through the arm extractions.
Gotcha. This makes perfect sense. Even people just listening, they don't have to see it.
Correct. Right? No one teaches this in the academies, right? This isn't taught. Hey, we're going to wrist lock you and bring it out, or we're just pulling. If you watch any, go to police activity or go to police posts and watch resisting arrest videos, you're going to watch the arm extractions. It's awful. They don't have an extraction. So then the next thing, most dangerous thing they do stomach down is build a house. Well, we're not trying to extract the arms if they got a house built. We want to win inside control and break them down. To stand up, they got to bring their knees off the mat. So one, we can pin. We talk about stapling a shin to the mat, picking an ankle, tight waisting, chopping, whatever, breaking them back down. From the back, our two primary positions of control are, again, knee on top, and then what we call low mount or a crab ride. We're actually below the butt with our feet inside, our knees outside.
Get it. Okay.
And then double underhooks or controlling behind the elbows. The reason we do that is, again, we don't get to pick sizes and skill levels. So most cops are going to probably be outsized or could be. And skill levels are probably going to be about the same, where neither of them are very proficient in fighting.
Gotcha.
Okay. If they buck up and we go to a back mount.
Going for a ride
and getting high. We post videos of this all the time, right? And say, hey, this is a shortcoming. We're going to a back mount without an arm secured. So we always say, we don't suggest the back mount's fine. If you're really good at riding legs, you have really high level wrestling and jiu-jitsu, and you can back mount and ride legs, it could be okay. But if you don't, choose one of the other two positions. Okay, I'm going to go knee on top and go low crab ride. I can still disengage, but I still control you and understand getting ready to access arms. When we access arms and we have space underneath them, we talk about double underhooks versus seatbelting.
Okay.
Double underhooks in a weapons-based entanglement is more important than a seatbelt.
Why?
And it's vital. If I seatbelt you, and the reason we seatbelt in jiu-jitsu is because the highest percentage of submission in combat sports is what?
It's going to be the choke, right?
Yeah, rear naked choke. Yeah. So we seatbelt so that we can choke. Our top hand is perfectly ready to choke. I have when I seatbelt, I could underhook an arm still and control that wrist.
Yeah.
But when I have a seatbelt,
yep,
my head is opposite side of the seatbelt.
Got you.
And then what am I doing? Can I see the other hand?
Nope.
Can I control it from going to its waistband?
No.
So I can't stop your presentation. I can't stop you from getting whatever you want to get to. Now I could be behind the 8 ball. So now I've lost time. If I double underhook and control both wrists, now I minimize your ability to get up. I also minimize your ability to present a weapon. And if I'm in that low mount or crab ride with those double underhooks and wrist control, it's very difficult to stand up. And if I'm losing that battle at the time, now I chose, okay, I tried to control, it failed. Right. Now I'm going to disengage, and I'm in a position to disengage. I haven't been reversed. I haven't got high. I haven't got, swept over. So that's kind of like how we talk about, these are the positions for each one. there's only so many things a human being does.
Totally.
Human behavior only does certain things when you arrest them. And I call them out on this. I'll say, listen, stomach down problems. A guy's on his stomach.
These are the high percentage things.
What are the 6 things he's going to do?
He's going to try to get up.
He's going to try to get up. So he's going to build a base. And if he can't build a base, he's going to do a push-up to build a base.
Yep. Then he's going to try to roll over.
He's going to try to roll.
Yeah. He's going to try to sit maybe.
He's going to try to sit, and he has to roll to sit.
Right. As soon as that starts happening, you're probably, he's maybe start kicking.
Or he's going to go for a weapon.
Yep.
He can become cooperative.
Yeah, that's he's got to lift that part out. Like, I'm done.
So at any point, I'm continuing my verbal dialogue with him,
he might stop doing what
I'm
he's doing.
constantly looking. If I de-escalate him at this position over a different position, I still now don't have to go through the rest of fighting with him. And then he can become cooperative. So if we have 2 to 3 routes to defeat all those positions.
Yep. The losses are stacking up for the suspect.
We're playing chess.
Chess, not checkers, right?
And not checkers.
Right. That makes perfect sense.
And if any of those fail, because everything fails at some point against somebody, then I disengage and I get on the radio. I get more people there. I get something between me and him. I go to a tool. Okay. Now I can resort back to them supporting.
We're in a whole other workflow at this point.
Another workflow.
Yeah. I love what you just said there just about it, like not being a perfect system. Nothing is, there's no one answer to any of these things. There's understanding the different directions you can go within the workflow to try to solve the problem that's in front of you.
There's no one move.
Ever. Yeah.
Ever.
But you also said the big takeaway is that I will take away from this conversation is that movement is life, and your ability to do that.
Yes.
In this situation, obviously, is super important. We see so many times, it's so hard to watch, just people that just clearly don't move well anyway, and they're trying to apply, even if they have some knowledge of tactics, they and maybe even some strength, you know, they have an inability to actually be able to, what's the word I'd be looking for? Demonstrate that they can do it. It's not the word. It's sitting on the tip of my tongue, but they just don't have that ability to express it. That's the word.
Express how they move.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking for.
That leads us into another conversation at all, is a movement. Right? We teach movement out of the clinch. And the reason we teach that is because it's so poor. Human reaction to stress or to fear, okay, is fight, flight, or freeze. As human beings, you and I move forward pretty good.
Yep, that's what we're built to do.
Untrained people move forward well.
That's what we do. We run and we walk.
If we freeze, that's just bad all around. That's not good for anybody. But when we flight, everyone wants to move straight backwards.
Or is it fair to say also, like, I feel like I see them, like, what they want to do is once they've engaged, they don't want to let go.
Yeah, sometimes they realize what my buddy Matt calls it positional amnesia. You have to have positional amnesia. When it fails, move on.
Got it.
Don't stay in that hamster wheel of stop resisting.
And you're just holding now, you're on this ride and it looks like a tornado happening.
Think about that in jiu-jitsu related. You're passing my guard. Once I know my guard has failed, if I keep trying to hold on my guard,
you're done.
You're getting to a better position and going to be secured. If, I realize my guard's failed and I start escaping prior to you securing, now I'm ahead in the next sequence, or at least putting myself in a better position. So same thing. When it fails, what are my principles and what are my next routes? And that's the important thing, right? Can I disengage and get mobile? Yep. Am I mobile enough to be transition to something else, a different position? Yes. We see these guys like go on their side all the time and people have issues with getting them back flat to prone them. Could I just leg drag him?
Right.
Yeah. I'm putting him on his side anyways because I'm just manipulating his hips and realigning his spine.
Putting him back down. Yeah.
Right. Or I'm putting him stomach down and you'll hear guys like, get on your stomach, get on your stomach, get on your stomach. Sure, we want to get them there. But if I'm going to arrest someone, even if he's not skilled and he's big, I know I'm probably going to win that fight, in the control fight. Like for me, when I show up to, and I know this guy's big and explosive, I'm like, okay, I'm going to be able to control him eventually here. But if he's stomach up, is it harder for him to stand up than if he's stomach down? Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, think of a turtle, the concept of a turtle.
100%.
Big dudes, put him on their back first, and then don't be in a rush to roll him. Your backup's getting closer. That dude's getting tired.
Yep.
Okay. I'm just using weight and pressure. don't be in a rush to roll that big explosive guy.
Yeah, nothing's more demoralizing. You didn't say this. You said knee on hip, but I'm thinking knee on belly. When you get that big guy with that big knee on belly, like that'll stop you from fighting back.
Yeah, or wear you out, right?
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Another phrase, and it's not mine, I wish it was, one of my instructors uses, what is our currency in a combative environment? Jiu-Jitsu, MMA, no-gi, whatever, police work. Whatever. What is our currency? Energy. When you're tired.
Got you. Your base level currency. Yes, for sure. That's ATP. Yeah.
When you're tired and your gas tank gets completely empty.
You're done.
You're done.
You're done.
Average human beings can't fight for more than 90 seconds, 100 seconds. So why am I in a rush to roll that big explosive dude?
And keep going.
Let him get tired first. Then roll him. Let more people get there.
Yeah, this goes back to that clinch thing though. And you mentioned like creating distance. And my perception sometimes is that like once they get in there, they don't want to let go. They recognize they've now made a decision to engage and they can't not do that now, which ends up getting them into way more trouble. Like there is a video, and I don't mean to bring anything specific up, but it was two California Highway Patrol officers that had pulled somebody over. I think there's a suspect still in the car, but they get somebody out. He's backed up towards the unit. One's keeping cover on the car, keeping watch over the car in front, while the suspect who'd come back he's on his hands he's on his knees, his hands behind his head. And so the one officer reaches up to what I would just assume would be to cuff him, but he actually grabs him and he tries to put him down on his belly from that position. And it turns into a wrestling match. And it's these two cops just going for a ride on this guy. Well, I don't know what's going on in the car. Nobody knows what's going on in the car, but it just went on and on and on and on. And I guess my point in saying that is if at some point they had just let go of where the dude went to like double leg, and this is a big guy, not super big, but big enough to drag him around the parking lot. Now the guy had then had to shift to a single, and he's literally just getting dragged across. It was really hard to watch. And
And was the second guy high? Or
the second guy was high.
Yeah.
He was trying to control everything that was going on with his arms. And at some point the guy turned and faced him, and it was wild. Where what I hear you saying is like, well, maybe just back off and start. You got the guy to calm down in the first place. I think he was pissed about, he'd already been being compliant, and the guy was trying to throw him onto the concrete face down, to the asphalt face down. He's like, no, I don't like that. Anyways, point of that story is the going for a ride when maybe the best thing to do is like get off the horse. Yeah. Like step back for a second.
Or if he's being cooperative, we teach standing cooperative, kneeling cooperative, prone cooperative. Now, kneeling and prone cooperative are usually going to be at like some sort of high level of force cover and contact. So we're minimizing like their position. We're just putting them somewhere. Mm-hmm. Prone is probably the best, but we'll kneel people depending on space sometimes. And if we're going to cuff them from there, we don't cuff anyone from their head. We'll keep their hands up, hands on their face and stuff.
Right.
Like when I go in to make contact, I have them put their hands behind their back. I control their hands back there, but crossing that guy's feet. Now I said, no, I'll cross them the other way. I don't tell them which way to cross them.
Right.
I'll cross them the other way. Then I'll step on it. Now that's a staple. So if he went to get up, he can't get up. He's stapling his own leg. Right. So simple things that you can do to
avoid that, what I just said.
To avoid doing that. Right. It happens. And there's a lot of videos out there from kneeling, cuffing going wrong. And it's just, again, sometimes we overcomplicate what we're doing. If the person's being cooperative also, like if you're being cooperative and you're coming back at me and then I kick you to the ground, you might be uncooperative.
Probably going to be fighting with you. Yeah. Exactly.
So again, de-escalation's in all different areas. When that fails, then things...
There has to be an answer.
There has to be an answer.
I wonder, so I didn't mean to get off track with that little story. It was just replaying in my head while I was listening to you kind of talk there. Like, what could these guys have done different? I'm not trying to armchair quarterback the thing. Who am I? I'm just a dude. But I wonder with now, having explained that and you being on the road and teaching this stuff, and it's been out, it's not novel, but it is fairly new in terms of, I think, how it's reaching people. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. So like the curriculum and content that I'm teaching, all of it's not new. I've been teaching it since, again, mid-2000, like 2006, 7, 8 at the department, really officially more at the department 08, 09, and then started branching out to gyms and then conferences and then the state.
And that was very new then.
Yeah.
Very new then.
Very new then. And it's always going. I worked with the PFC guys. I worked with Chad Lyman and C4C. So I've been around a whole bunch of different people teaching and building this curriculum for years. Mm-hmm. And it's never set. It's never going to be a concrete.
It's totally evolving all the time.
One, use of force changes. Two, technology changes. Mm-hmm. We have to be relevant to when society changes and things change to building it. So it's not new. I think EFC is fairly new, mm-hmm. but the content is not new. The experience is not new. It's just on a different platform.
So I wonder how with that, and that it has evolved, and this isn't, and then BJJ evolving, and now you're teaching these classes. And so people have had some experience that's much different than your original experience mm-hmm. now. So they're coming in, having taken other courses, classes, maybe it's being delivered at a better or not so much or not so good level at their own departments, their own training or whatever. So when people are coming to your classes, and I guess what I'm asking is, who are you teaching? Like, who is the student right now? Like, what are they coming in with, like a depth of knowledge? Is it very, tell me about this.
It's across the board.
Yeah. So let's talk about these guys.
So I get guys that come in that have no skills in striking, wrestling, or jiu-jitsu. They just police experience, basic DT in the academy. Maybe they've never even done. Okay? To guys that are black belts.
Okay. UFC
fighters. I had Jimmy Rivera on my last course in Nashville.
Oh, no shit.
Right? And Jimmy was a top 135-pound contender. I mean, he fought the who's who of that division.
Okay.
Is in there. So understanding the skill level goes literally from 0 to 100.
Okay.
I teach to the competent level cop. Because right now I know we're, as a profession, highly undertrained. Mm-hmm. And I can't have a system that is so confusing or so detailed or so advanced that the competent level cop can't retain it. They need to retain it and they need to regurgitate it.
And be able to practice it. Right?
And be able to practice it. So again, what we do is we take a skill development module that we teach first. And we talk about our principles. We talk about concepts in every different position, but our principles are rooted into 5 main principles. And then we take the skills from jiu-jitsu, mm-hmm. skills from wrestling, skills from striking, and then we integrate it with the use of force and the experience that we have on the tactics side in law enforcement.
Okay.
And that's where it's like a system, right? So we're not going out there and showing triangles and arm bars and any of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not practical for what our outcome is. Our law enforcement outcome is custody, then control, or to de-escalate something. Okay? It's not to do that. So we take these fundamental skills, underhooks, overhooks, mm-hmm. inside head position, arm drags.
Which is common across all the things you just mentioned, whether it be grappling, BJJ, yes. or striking, Muay Thai, whatever.
And to be honest, like on the ground, we talk a lot about hip escaping, recomposing, getting our feet in there, wedging out, standing up. Standing, we teach more wrestling fundamentals than we do jiu-jitsu fundamentals. And the reason being is most jiu-jitsu guys suck at takedowns.
Yeah, so I was just going to ask that same question. Like with that vast of, sort of spectrum of people, who are the harder ones to teach? Is it the ones that are ingrained in doing certain things? And again, you said like the BJJ black belt that just wants to apply his BJJ to this. And again, you're talking about police officers who probably likely have some experience and understand that it doesn't completely, that it can't be that all the time. Or is it the person that's like, they're just fresh, maybe semi-athletic, they're fit enough to get this stuff? Is there somebody in between?
At first, I was always nervous about like, hey, we get black belts coming in, collegiate level All-Americans coming in for wrestling and being like, man, what are they going to learn from these first few blocks? Mm-hmm. Nothing. They know how to do underhooks, overhooks. Gotcha. Jay didn't make up underhooks. Jay didn't make overhooks. Jay definitely didn't make up arm wraps and leg laces. Right. Neither did anybody else. Like it's been around for centuries in wrestling. Mm-hmm. Okay. So what those guys take out of it is how we bridge the gap from the skills into the tactics.
I love that.
Because a lot of cops aren't super skilled in tactics either. Mm-hmm. Okay, so maybe they're high level. Being a jiu-jitsu or high level wrestler is only one piece of the puzzle in police work, to be honest. And that's controlling someone when we're controlling them.
Right, you covered that pretty upfront right from the beginning.
But if we're not controlling them, and we have to add tactics in, How's your weapon manipulation? Okay.
Whole other deal.
How's your communication? Do you guys have an SOP for team tactics? How's working to a barricade? How's your movement out of the clinch? Combatives is a full spectrum. It comes full circle. All that stuff comes back. If you're a gun guy and I'm a DT guy and I suck at shooting, so I shoot 70 on paper, okay, to pass the qual, but I have a 25-yard problem and it's a gun problem, that's not good for me. If you're the gun guy and you don't teach fighting and you and I get in a fight in a closet or a doorway type area, you're going to have trouble. Like, oh, I just take my gun out. Oh, go ahead. Because it's going to be mine as much as it is yours, right?
Try that.
So like, understand we have to bring them together. We got to quit training in silos.
Okay.
Police work trains in silos. Range, DT, building clearing, so on and so forth. In a real event, that stuff can all happen
at the same time, inside seconds, right?
Underhooks, double underhooks, slow crab ride. I have double underhooks on you. If I don't have double underhooks on you and I have seatbelt, you could present a weapon in less than a second. This is a different fight now.
Totally different.
So I think that's where the way I looked at training for going on 2 decades now, okay, is if a position is good, let's say the mount, 3 common responses from the new guy when he gets mounted is he belly out. That's good for me if I'm the cop. He pushes away. That's also good for me as a cop because I can just manipulate his arms. But the one where he just reaches up and grabs a hold of me and holds on,
that's a different story.
That could be bad for me. I can't move. Now I can't get mobile, and he might be able to reverse the position. So if one of the responses could be detrimental, I don't teach it. I teach to what I know is going to integrate in the easiest for the competent level police officer.
So I think that's a thing that comes with instructing. There's knowledge, there's skill, there's some wisdom in there on how to put all this together based on experience. And there's a lot of armchair quarterbacking. And I see all different types of training happening out there in combatives, firearms, whatever, fitness, all those things, people jumping in. I don't want to call it the peanut gallery, but people adding their opinions in to kind of what they're seeing and having their opinion based on a particular skill that you might be talking about, or technique that you might be, or tactic that you might be talking about. I'm not picking one out, but just in general, again, on a place like Instagram or YouTube or something like that, and saying, but there's always going to be but. Sure. There's always a depends in all of this, but there's also the who you're teaching. And you're never going to know that from watching the 15-second or 30-second Instagram clip or whatever else. And so I try to look at that very objectively. And again, that's why a little bit of this has been mysterious to me, is trying to understand, like, who are the people that are coming in and what are they bringing to the table, and versus what they're not bringing to the table, and how is the instruction evolving to meet the needs of those people. Because I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing everything from departments actually paying for their officers to get, BJJ school memberships, in
and that's
places.
A good change.
I don't disagree.
Me neither.
But at the same time, is it the solution? I think I'm not bad.
I think it's a part of the solution.
I agree with it. So that's what I would say. So there's this gaps still. And, are we doing the right things for our officers and for our public, out there by doing that kind of a thing? I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Because this will continue to evolve, and it's clearly obviously needed. So I wonder how you, I don't want to say scale it, that's not the right thing, but get it out there.
So I'm not a huge fan of make jiu-jitsu mandatory. What I'm a huge fan of is make grappling mandatory. Okay? Because grappling if you take the grappling umbrella, you could have wrestling, judo, sambo, jiu-jitsu.
I love this.
All of that under there. We have to be good on our feet. We have to be good at takedown defenses. We have to be good at taking people down. We have to be good at holding people down. And we also have to be good at getting up from the bottom. Standing is primarily wrestling, maybe some judo. On the ground, it might vary a little bit more towards jiu-jitsu, but it's also got wrestling in there. And why I say it might vary more towards jiu-jitsu on the ground than the wrestling aspect, where wrestling standing, it way levels more towards wrestling standing than jiu-jitsu. But on the ground in wrestling, what's common is we belly out and face away from our opponent. Now we lose track of their arms, our weapons are exposed, those type of things. Where in jiu-jitsu, you're taught to face your opponent. right? Not expose your back.
Like the wrist control, hand control.
Correct. But on the ground also, like stopping people from getting up is both jiu-jitsu and wrestling. So it's a mix of making that mandatory. And the environment changes things a little bit. It doesn't change the skill that does that. Like my sports skill in jiu-jitsu, if I know how to integrate it into the street, can work. I just have to know how to do it, and what works and what doesn't work. I think if I'm going to shoot a penetration step and take you down on a hard surface,
it's going to look a little different.
And it's going to hurt.
Yeah.
If I penetrate full speed with my knee to concrete, it's different than penetrating on a mat.
Yikes. Yeah.
If I penetrate on a low shot and it fails, where am I at?
Yeah.
I'm underneath the person.
In a bad spot on concrete or whatever.
We try to talk about our takedowns as being more upper body takedowns. We'll go to like snatch singles, but we're upright. We'll go to body locks,
judo and grappling,
hug on bars, those types of things, right? But we don't get into like low level shots because if it goes bad, then we're in a bad spot. The competent level person has to understand their skills too. And we make them open to these options. If my hands-on fails, create space, start getting people there. Look at Taser. Taser is perfect for understanding the concept between team tactics of the high-low takedown. In Taser, you want to get NMI, which is like neuromuscular incapacitation. If I take the probes off and I just touch tase you, that's only pain compliance. If I shoot you and the probes both get really close, I'm only getting that NMI in a close spot. So they talk about their concept, and the best shooting for that like is going to get above and below the belt line. The reason is that now I affect below your belt line, your legs, and I affect the top.
Good luck with that.
Okay, which is difficult. So a lot of times taser fails a lot, but a lot of it's operator error. Because if I get a shot close to you, I need to follow up the drive stun below it to then get that connection.
Okay, got it.
But high-low. So the NMI is best if I have a probe low and a probe high. So if I'm controlling you with hands, I want to control you high, but I also want to control you low. So in a two-person system, we shouldn't both be high and both be low. One should be high, one should be low. That makes it more difficult for the suspect that you're fighting. Always, never are really bad words in police work. One move works every single time. BS. My gun doesn't work every single time. Whether it malfunctions, I loaded it wrong.
Something.
Press checks are free and I didn't press check it. So it clicks when I pull the trigger, but your gun can fail. Of course, control tactics can fail. Where do I go then without getting overwhelmed? When we talked about that, where your brain, responds to fear and stress.
Goes to alligator brain real fast.
Yeah. In emotions, we can train to beat emotions, but you got to train it. And you got to train athletes. We got to train cops to be like athletes, not to be robots. We have unathletic people in there. It's going to be more difficult for them to learn movement. If we don't teach them movement at all, they're not going to move properly. When we teach our movement blocks, we teach them to move like a defensive back. We're opening our hips and moving in the direction of travel. Stop going backwards. Backwards has one pro, creates distance initially. After that, it's all bad.
Better figure something else out.
Yeah. So our human reaction to fear, if it's backwards, isn't good. Flat range fails, that we call, again, training in a silo, standing on a static line and shooting at paper isn't helping us. Fundamentally, we can get good there, but then we need to start moving around. In our profession, now we have the access to UTMs, simunitions, all different types of non-lethal training ammunition. We can now put that in a 360 environment. So now we can actually train in a 360 environment. On the range, we can move maybe 270 if we're not on a static line at best with live fire. But in a UTM, non-lethal training ammunition world or simunitions, we can move in a 360 environment. So now we can start to integrate that into training as well, because that's important. We're not standing flat on a line. And for years, range training and police work, it has to be so safe. They want to be so safe that it's actually hurting us out in the field. Because if they've never moved 360 in an environment,
what do you expect them to do?
What do you expect them to do? And do you think they're going to sit still and stand still and shoot on paper in a gunfight? They're not.
You failed them.
You failed them.
One of the other things that I think I see quite frequently is like what we're talking about is very specific to police officers. And, I mentioned this earlier on. I mean, there's rules, there are things, there is, but there are also other, I guess, companies and people that are out there teaching combatives a different way. Combatives, like as you've already described, is very broad. There are a lot of things in there, and you just happen to be teaching it specific to police officers for all the reasons that it's important that we do that. See a lot of other folks out there do a really good job with the combative space, but it's not necessarily LEO specific. And so people see that stuff. And there's a lot of great ones out there. I've had other guys on the show that are in that space. And I think people are a little confused, in terms of how the crossover works. Like It looks the same, but this looks a little bit more violent over here, while this looks a little bit more steady. Look, I'm not a cop, so how much of what I see, EFC doing, applies to me versus what I see these other guys doing over here with the blade work and the gun work and the wrestling matches that are happening in, high gear suits or, whatever that they happen to be wearing. I wonder if you can maybe talk a little bit about that and the questions that you might get faced with frequently and how you answer those.
Yeah. So, we call that pressure testing. Mm-hmm. There's multiple levels of pressure testing. In level 1, we only do minimal pressure testing, which means MMA gloves on, blue gun, cert gun. We don't even get into UTMs, but we'll say, hey, I want your partner to give you just enough struggle that your route 1 or 2 fails, and then you work up and finish in a good position.
Okay.
Because you're going to start to learn there. If this guy just comes and dominates you right away, you might be like, hey, I got train wrecked. I got to get better here, but you probably didn't learn a lot there. Yep. So if I just say, give him a little bit of struggle. Now, if you sweep him right away or stand right up, and I'll be like, you got to up the resistance a tiny bit. But that's like the first low level of pressure testing. And we do that in level 1. What we call reality-based training is realistically our level 2 course. And that is introducing in UTM ammunitions for what people know as non-lethal ammunition platforms where you're actually shooting projectiles. They don't feel great. They can hurt.
This is not an unpopular thing. We see this happening.
Happens all the time. And you're putting like Redbeard Combatives makes a really good helmet that we use and with a hood. And I think a bunch of people in that space use him because it's probably the best one where, hey, we can punch a guy now. Because sometimes you'll get the guy from Krav or the guy from somewhere. I would just punch that dude. Mm-hmm. Now you can punch that dude.
Yep.
Now, you can punch him, but he's got a headgear on. Right? The headgears are great and probably the best ones that I've seen. The downfall of the headgear, though, is your vertical view down.
You can't see down yet.
Is very, very difficult. Okay, so there are shortcomings even in the highest level of pressure testing. But do you have a full out go there and it's just freestyle? Okay. Or do you have, okay, I've built this role player.
Some parameters.
And I want my cop to meet this objective. And my role player can't freestyle it. My role player has to get to a point. He's giving him resistance. The cop's going 100% or game speed, his sprint speed. And my role player is going to be going hard, but he's staying to a script because I want to see if he meets certain objectives.
Yep.
Okay. That is really where I've seen it work and it helps situationally, right? Building it through to that aspect. Of course, you can freestyle to do a full-out pressure test, but that's not even the highest level of pressure testing. Mm-hmm. What is the highest level of pressure testing?
It's the one you can't recreate.
It's the one you can't recreate. It's when it happens in the street, when it happens in the real-life environment, the stage that is for all the marbles, right? Like if it's bad, you could get shot and killed. So the highest level of pressure testing is when my students give me their body cams and they're crushing the 2-man takedowns to control. They're crushing the weapon-based entanglement stuff. That's the highest level of pressure. That's in the real environment.
They can't control. They can't control who they're doing it against. Correct. They don't know what's going to happen. Nobody's been pre-set up for this. I respect that. I mean, I think that is the one way. And somebody can always come in and nitpick that. Like, that wasn't really a worthy adversary. You were 10 times the size of that person.
Correct.
Or whatever. But I don't think that's a fair way to look at it. Fair isn't a thing. I don't think that's an objective way to look at it.
I get that a lot. So I was fortunate enough that I've had a lot of uses of force over my career. And I wish I could have all of them. I wish all of them were on body cam. Some of them were before body cam and some of them aren't when I was in an undercover unit, that kind of stuff. But I was able to get a good handful of my body camera videos and we post them.
Mm-hmm.
And the question or the feedback you get is, yeah, but you're a black belt and you train all the time.
This is ridiculous to me. Like,
and I'm okay. I get it. And here's the thing. Even if we make training mandatory,
mm-hmm.
and people say make jiu-jitsu mandatory, make wrestling, whatever, it's not make one lane of training mandatory. It's make training mandatory. Mm-hmm. That comes back on the lawmakers. That comes back on administration. And that's building clearing, vehicle tactics,
all
DT,
the things that you got to do.
And they have to do it continuously. If you want to change, people want to like change policing. Okay. Like during COVID, it was like defund the police. No, what you need to do is you need to force them to train. The model right now of going to the academy for 6 months, getting 2 weeks of DT and 2 weeks of range, and then maybe training it once a year or less is a broken model.
Very broken.
But we keep doing it.
Yep.
And that's not going to change until legislation is made to train continuously. And that's not just in DT lane. That's in all lanes across the board.
Yeah, decisions have to be made about what's going to be happening now through the next 5 to 10 years, not what's going to happen next year based on the event that happened last year.
Yes.
And that's what we see happening. And I think there's probably some level of there's some value that can be extracted from that, right? Like, okay, so yep, policing is changing a little bit. How we do these things is changing a little bit. This is forcing us to make some decisions, but there isn't any life in that. There's no longevity in that. And again, going back to testing it to see if whether or not it works or not, it never works like that. Correct. It is an assumption being made about something that something that was done. The case on that is still open and ongoing, and we're already making changes to use of force policies or laws or whatever else as a result. And somebody comes and says, well, we can fix that by doing this. And ultimately, and it's almost every single time, we learn that was the wrong decision, and here's where it showed up.
Caving to the narrative.
Many, many times over.
We can't cave to the narrative.
We're still doing this. Like, I mean, the things that happened back in 2020, I mean, we're suffering those consequences in spades.
We're suffering, and we have to be better as society as a whole and look at it and be like, we can't have knee-jerk reactions. There can't be knee-jerk reactions. Police reform, police reform. You want true police reform? You need to mandate that the departments train continuously. And that's not once a year,
right,
or 4 times every 2 years. Like, if I lifted weights 4 hours a year, I would suck at lifting weights next year still.
Yeah, it's pretty basic.
So now you want cops wearing duty belts, okay, going out and dealing with guys that are probably bigger than them, under the influence of drugs, being violent, and you want them to be good at tactics, control tactics, but they don't train them, the academy, and then maybe once a year at best, they're not going to be good at them. And that's just a broken model of policing. That is a professional issue, and that is not going to be solved until legislation forces it to be solved, because you know what they're going to get? We can't train because the cops are going to get hurt when we're training.
So that cover your ass, the layers of liability there are the things that stifle everything, really, in terms of growth, in terms of any kind of reform that you might want, because you have layered the city, the department, the agency, the whatever, the leadership in so many different layers of liability in trying to insulate them from things. It has completely stifled any kind of growth. And so what I see happening is, go back, I think I was asking this earlier, is like I've seen departments where like, oh, well, now we'll pay, that's cool. Like, we recognize our officers need more training. So we'll pay for their BJJ school, membership or whatever, as long as this school is participating in our program. But all that is like a fucking laying it. It's like you're farming it out to somebody else, which would be the same thing as me farming out my safety to the police department and not doing anything to protect myself or learn how to protect myself or de-escalate situations or get out of situations, whatever the case is, however we want to put that. and expecting somebody else is going to do it for me. That is negligence in my mind. And I'm not saying that it's bad that they're trying to, maybe the approach is, look, we recognize there are all these layers, and it's the fastest way to get our guys at least some training, and that some of the training they need is to pay for this. I think that's a good thing, but that's not the answer.
No, they realize they don't have the resources in-house, so they're relying on a community member to do that. Now, that is a start for the skills.
Agreed. Yeah.
But then are we taking those skills and putting them into tactics, or does that school have some sort of combatives program, right, that is related to policing or armed security or whatever
EP,
whatever it is, EP that they're doing, right? Like, we're getting a ton of hospital security in our courses.
Oh, no shit.
I bet you every course we have 2 or 3 armed hospital security guards or unarmed hospital security guards in our courses.
Didn't see that coming.
And they're saying they're going hands-on all the time, and they're not getting any training on it.
Holy cow. That
so
never crossed my mind.
We're getting them a lot. We get a lot of armed security. The Quick Trips and the local gas stations and the hotels are all paying for armed security. What type of training do you think those guys are getting?
None. They're getting zero.
They're getting zero. So now they're starting to actually see this, and they're starting to come to, we're seeing more security, and now their rules might be a little bit different.
Sure.
And realistically, it's probably lesser than our general orders.
I was just going to say.
Yeah. Right? So like understanding like they might have a little bit different of the rules of the game, but nothing really changes in, hey, how do I work tactics? How do I control you? How do I de-escalate things? Yeah. How do I problem solve? And I'm glad you said that, because I tell people, you come to my 40-hour course, I'm not going to make you a tactician in 40 hours.
That's impossible.
It's not going to happen. I can make you a problem solver, or I can start to put you on the path to being a problem solver and give you a virtual library of skills that you can build on as you go. You're not going to be a good instructor in 40 hours. I've been teaching, like I told you, since like the early 2000s, and I'm
still
not
learning.
Perfect. I'm still learning at being a better teacher. Every class I try to be better, right? And it's like, when I stop learning or I stop getting better, I shouldn't be doing this anymore.
You're done. Yeah.
You're done. You shouldn't be doing it anymore.
So going back to that, giving them the skills to be a better problem solver. And then let's say you have that self-motivated, self-initiated cop who is then going, yeah, and I go to jiu-jitsu 3 days a week because that's what I can get in, in my schedule, and still get to the gym to lift weights and still get to the range and shoot once a week or whatever it happens to be. They go there. When they go to that school, again, if it's not specific to the job, then what they're getting is a workout. They're practicing some skills in the sport of jiu-jitsu, but they are wearing a gi, or maybe they're not wearing a gi. They're certainly not working in and around weapons, unless, and I've seen some schools do this, it gets kind of wild. They throw a rubber knife or a blue gun on the floor, and they tell people to go after it, and whatever. But that's not the type. That's not good. That's not the type of training we're talking about. Not in general. So they're forced to. I don't know if force is the right word, but they're going through this training. They're getting good training. Again, it's something is better than nothing, but it isn't specific to the job. And so what you're doing is going back to being athletes, and you were mentioning this before in the movement piece, and having a law enforcement officer think of themselves and behave as if they are an athlete or a professional athlete. That's not how professional athletes. I'm not gonna send my pitcher from the San Francisco Giants to go to the pool to go swim training. Yeah. It doesn't make any fucking sense, right? I'm also not going to, he's an overhead athlete, he throws, but I'm not sending him to volleyball practice, right? I'm going to send him to a coach and to a place that teaches something that is very specific to the job that I expect him to be able to perform. And that isn't what's happening. But what I do see is that people recognize this. And it seems like there's a lot of people trying to enter into this space somehow, coming from the combatives world, the martial arts world, however you want to see it. But I don't see a lot of people doing it in a way, to me, that's attacking the law enforcement side very specifically.
So I will say it's like a double-edged sword. Right. They're leaning on a resource outside that's giving them the skills. So now this person is going to have, jiu-jitsu has a lot of benefits. It makes you uncomfortable. You're just going to help you with your emotions in bad spots, those types of things. how do we integrate the tactics? That's where the lapse comes from jiu-jitsu to what we do is how does the tactics come into and our rule set, okay? There are I get a lot of black belts that are community members that aren't cops that are asking to come to the class. And they ask me and they say, I want to come because I'm teaching a lot of law enforcement and I'm teaching them jiu-jitsu, which is a good, but I don't understand the integration, or I want to be better in how I help them do that.
Don't want to say the wrong thing or teach them the wrong thing.
Correct.
Or give them, or let them leave here feeling with a
so we started what we call a certified academy. And that is they send an instructor.
Got it.
He gets certified in the level 1. He understands what we're doing. He's not going to have the experience, but he understands. And then I send him back with a 26-week layout of how to run a 1-hour class in how I would run it for combatives versus for jiu-jitsu purposes. Okay. So there's ways that we can integrate it to help. The best way is going to be getting more cops in your divisions and in your departments that can actually have the experience and train. And until then, we need to rely on these jiu-jitsu community members. But how do we do that? Or realize if we're relying on them, we're only relying on them for a piece of the puzzle.
Correct.
And that is going to be the fitness part of the jiu-jitsu, maybe the mentality of making them a little bit mentally stronger and of being used to being uncomfortable. But we're not going to understand their skills are going to be there, but we have to realize how to relate those skills back to the profession. And that could be different depending on what profession we're talking about. And here we're talking mainly law enforcement, but that can vary. We had a guy from Australia come over and he runs a gym in Australia and he teaches a bunch of cops. He had to cancel the first class because he couldn't rent a car. They wouldn't let him rent a car with his Australian driver's license. So I roll in. He's like, hey, I got it figured out. Can I come to the PA class? So he comes to the PA class. I roll in Monday morning. What do you think I see in the driveway? A 1999 U-Haul rental truck.
Oh, no. Hey, man, that's resourceful as hell.
You know who was driving that? The Aussie.
That's awesome. That is resourceful as hell.
But he paid out of his own pocket, out of his gym account, whatever, because he says, I'm teaching a lot of cops and I'm teaching them the skills, but I don't know, like, in what direction I should start to move these skills. And he wants to help them move those skills back to what their goal is. I love
this. So this is a thing because this is where this comes up a lot sort of in firearms training too, with regard to teaching, well, this is a controversial word, but teaching gunfighting, whatever that means. But the point of that being is the practical hands-on experience that you've had as a law enforcement officer that has actually done the job. It has body cam footage to back all that up or whatever. Not that we need to be doing that on the resume. My point being is people trying to step in to teach things and they have good intentions. Like we want to make sure these cops are prepared for this stuff. And they're asking me about it and I'm in front of them and they're being conscientious. Like, look, I know there's things I don't know here and I don't want to, the conscientious ones will be like, I don't want to be giving them information that could potentially get them hurt or is incorrect or whatever else. So let's step up the training. But at what point do you see people, I think, out there, both on the law enforcement side, which is an interesting point. It's only now to me sort of being more recognized outside of like the competition shooter world that law enforcement officers go to people that don't have law enforcement or maybe military backgrounds for their shooting instruction. Competition is one thing, but now we're seeing people that aren't necessarily grandmaster shooters. Some of them are, but aren't necessarily grandmaster shooters where law enforcement, even military, are like, look, this is a very solid instructor who's done the work and there's a lot for us to take away here from the fundamentals perspective or marksmanship, whatever it happens to be. Now on this, though, because this is a different topic and it is so new, like firearms has been firearms, shooting has been shooting for a long time. But what we're talking about today, and I said this word earlier in terms of it being novel, it isn't novel, but the things that you're saying and the way you're saying them, I'm just an infant in this, but they sound relatively new. We already know the departments aren't hearing it this way. We've already been through all of that. They're still teaching the same shit in the defensive tactics stuff that they've been doing forever. Right. So we're seeing, again, people maybe entering in the space or whatnot and having conversations about this. What are your thoughts just with regard to when we get to a place where cops or somebody that's been in this, whether it's EP or something else that has done this for a living, are going to be able to bring certain things to the table that maybe somebody else hasn't? And how much can those people teach the people that haven't to still do a good job with it at this point in the evolution?
Yeah. So at this point in the evolution, you're definitely seeing more cops able to train. There's more cops that are black belts. There's more cops that have the police experience and are black belts. Mm-hmm. There's more cops that have maybe SWAT experience. And so they can start keeping it in-house a little bit more. I'm all for going outside the house to different range trainings, different DT trainings, because you may learn something, you may learn fundamentals, right? Law enforcement is a profession, especially in the SWAT aspect of it. Not lean still, or leaned a lot, even more so in the past, on the military SF guys coming back to teach them CQB and clearing. Because those guys were doing it every day over there, and they're the best guys at doing it.
It made sense.
Makes sense. Now, they're teaching you the skills, the tactics they feel are best, and there's still a tiny bit of integration into what is the rules on stateside versus across the pond or wherever you're at. Okay, so understanding no matter what lane we get into or what silo we are in, if we're going outside the profession, there's going to be a little bit of a gap. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's bad.
Okay.
Because can you learn? I personally have learned a ton of gun skills from a guy that was on the teams in the Navy. And he's a good friend of mine. And I'm telling you, my long gun skills are so much better from being around him. But he doesn't pretend to always know exactly how it would be utilized in the police world.
Got it.
Right? He doesn't always pretend to know. Sometimes he'll be like, hey, this is the skills and how I would do it here. How do we tweak it to get it into this world? But am I better for being around that dude? Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Am I better from learning from him?
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. So are they better from learning from jiu-jitsu? Yes. Their skills are there. If I have skills, tactics are much easier to teach. If I have a guy that's not skilled and his tactics suck, it's much harder to teach.
Sure.
Coming back to the people in the classes, 0 skill, black belt skill. One of my good buddies, black belt, goes to DT school to get his certification. It's 2 weeks school through the state. We're in day 2, and it's basically dominating from bad positions. We're sweeping people, getting up, not being on bottom. So when our curriculum is, if our back's on the ground, our goal is we're standing up or getting on top. Okay? Sweeping, kicking out, wedging away, keeping it fairly simple, not looking at submitting the guy, arm bars, triangles. Like that's not what our outcome is. Our outcome is to get back on top. Okay. So, or get to our feet. He's just treating these kids like these other students in the class like their child. And he's not a small dude. He's 220, power lifter. Like he's strong. Okay? And he's a black belt.
He's dominating.
Yeah, and he's good on a gun. So he's well-rounded. Then we did some resistant drilling, and he's still dominating position. But he got his gun taken twice and didn't know it the first time, right? Because he was so dominant in his side control position that the dude couldn't move. And he was so dominant in that control that he forgot that the other hand isn't accounted for.
Because it's the sport of jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. Now,
what he's applying.
Is that a simple fix for him? Is that an oh crap moment for him?
For sure.
Will I ever let him live it down? No.
I wouldn't.
But he's too good to let that ever happen again. He's fixed it right away. And now try to get it from not happening. Because he now sees the difference between the two.
Because he trained.
Right. Okay. Or he's training. I should say he's training. Right. And he's still training. He's still on the team. And my team, I benefited from all the guys on my team. And the reason being, from the time I was on it till the time I left. And by the time I got on it, I think maybe me and one other guy trained like wrestling and jiu-jitsu. That was it. When I left, we had 2 or 3 black belts, a couple brown belts, purple belts, 3 All-American wrestlers. One that was a Division I wrestler at one point that lost to Bo Nickel in the Clarion finals, like 2-3. Like the amount of hands-on skills that these guys had was incredible. And you learned from all of them. We learned from the wrestlers, and the wrestlers learned from the jiu-jitsu guys. So it's like surrounding yourself with people that might have different lanes, but then just realizing, hey, we got to realize how to integrate it into what we're doing. Eventually, now as that team, we didn't need to reach out if we didn't want to.
Yeah.
We could do it all in-house. Did we still reach out sometimes? Sure. Why? Because you can always learn something.
I think that, so the way you just walk through that and kind of the different disciplines, the growth of the team, the individuals on the team, then as that helps the team grow, which then can help a department grow or help a city grow,
Correct.
An area grow. That's where I see this evolution kind of happening. And I'm glad you articulated that, because I don't know that I ever really put that together, that it's not that there's a resistance to going outside. It's just there's a need to do that because the training doesn't exist in-house right
Correct.
now. And so just how are we the term I guess would be like, how are we nurturing and cultivating this, or cultivating and then nurturing it so that it moves in the right direction, so that we're not in a year from now going, shit, we've been doing the wrong things. Not we've been doing the wrong things. Like, this is what we're learning and we're continuing to evolve. And then bringing folks in from the outside and not settling for, this is the system that works and this is what we teach because it's the way we've always taught it, kind of thing.
Yes.
And it's rooted in this one thing. And I keep bringing it up. You're not doing that. I'm doing it with regard to the BJJ thing, because it's the thing that seems to get the most attention in my mind.
Right now, it's the hot topic, right? Hey, get jiu-jitsu in there. Jiu-jitsu mandatory. Go out listen. I think everyone should train jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so do I. I think it's
not
great.
just for police work.
Yeah, it's great for fitness. It's great for fun. Teaches you a lot of stuff.
In the
Community,
end,
the whole thing.
What is average response time for police? Like 6 to 8 minutes.
It's an eternity if you're in a wrestling match with somebody.
Yeah. So they're not coming to save you right away. You have to be able to save yourself, whether you're in law enforcement or not. You go to the grocery store and someone tries to take your child. Are you just going to go red on that dude? You don't know how to fight?
Right. Yeah, that whole like, oh, this is what I would do.
Yeah.
Would you?
Would you? We know the answer to that. We know the answer to that. They don't know the answer to that. So I think it has so many benefits. Law enforcement model as a whole is just broken because we train in silos. We don't integrate it all together. And if we go outside, like my range guys could be different, teaching something completely different than my DT guys are completely. How do we change that? You have to have some sort of integration into your tactics. And that can be done in multiple different ways.
Yep.
Maybe it's not the exact same way Jay does it. Maybe he does it a little bit differently. That's a good thing about understanding the principles, the concepts of like the rule set that you're fighting in, or the case law that you're fighting in, or the state law you're fighting in, is, again, there are different ways to do things. And I may say, okay, the why that you're doing it is I wouldn't do it that way. This is why I'm doing it my way. Now, this guy might say, hey, I'm doing this way. I'm like, okay, that's decent. You could do it that way. You can get away with that. So I'll say, hey, this is why and this is not why. Let's take, for instance.
You're just giving rationale.
Yes. Let's take, for instance, weapon retention in the holster. Most common thing taught across the country up until recently, and probably still now by overwhelming majority, is someone gets on your gun. People get both hands to it.
Mm-hmm.
So if I bring both hands to the gun and control that gun with both hands, now you have nothing stopping you from sucking space and winning an angle. So now I'm positionally disadvantaged and you're grabbing my gun. So when I commit two hands to the gun, I'm giving up space in an angle. I don't commit two hands to the gun, and I think it's a terrible idea.
Yeah, theoretically, this is interesting. Theoretically, that makes sense, right? I got to do everything I can to keep that gun from coming out of there. But by doing that, the math, that math doesn't math.
Now I have two dilemmas. He's on my gun, and I don't have a good position to start solving the solution. Because now he's bear hugged me or is moving. Fairfax County, Virginia. I think it was last August or last summer. Stolen U-Haul video. Cop gets out, approaches a guy that's driving a stolen U-Haul.
I remember this.
Grabs his gun.
Yeah.
First off, there's no skills. There's no level change and there's no stance. He doesn't frame. He takes two hands to the gun. Bad guy closes space and kidnaps him. Literally puts him in his own cruiser and drives it backwards, right? Yeah. Like, that all started because he committed two hands to the gun.
And that was the tactic that was, or technique that was taught to him.
I just taught in Oklahoma. I flew directly from Oklahoma here. I was just in Oklahoma for a week. I flew here. when I said, what are you guys teaching for weapon retention? Everyone put bringing both hands to the gun. Still being taught. I said, that's okay. I don't like it. I would throw it out yesterday. Forget about it. This is the why we don't do it. When you explain the why, sometimes people get it. If you just say, oh, this is a better way, do it this way because.
Right.
No, this is why we do it this way. I've been teaching it that way for years. And then when this U-Haul video came out, I'm like, thank God I have a real live body-worn camera showing why not to do it that way. Because now...
That's not just you saying it.
Correct. This is what happened.
Resulted in a... Yeah, it's all
right?
bad.
Thank God the officer was unharmed. Not unharmed, who was not shot. Because the guys that responded there dumped a mag into that car. They didn't think he was in there. They thought he... Right? Like,
it was scary.
Yeah.
It was all bad.
It's crazy.
Watch that thing unwind and it just goes back to like, did the officer do something wrong? Quote unquote wrong. I use the air quotes. He did what he was trained to do. And so often we see that.
And that's a conditioned response.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying.
These guys, even 4, 5, 6, 10 reps in, still catching themselves going to two hands. We don't do weapon retention where you watch me grab your gun. Very common. Hey, we're going to go back and forth. We're going to do 10 reps. You do 10 reps. Okay, we're going to do cross grabs first. There's only really 3 gun grabs you can do. Cross grab, 2-hand grab, straight on grab. If I solve them in the front, solving them in the back's just as easy. I turn and I have 1, 2, or 3 again.
Gotcha.
If you see me grabbing your gun so that you can drill it, what kind of response are you conditioning?
I have to be able to see it first.
You're allowing me to grab your gun.
Yeah.
Multiple times throughout your career and training. I'm conditioning a response for you to grab my gun. So what we do before we do weapon retention is we do a drill called deflection. And this comes back to principle number 1, being aware of human behavior, what they're doing. I talk to you within touch distance and you're going to reach for my gun and you're going to try to grab it. And when you do, I deflect you. And then I go and do my 2 options, engage you or disengage you. Okay. That conditions me to deflect a gun grab. Stop it from happening before it occurs. When we do gun grabs from the front, we do it from a pummeling drill.
Gotcha.
You and I are just
already engaged.
We're going to pummel. Yep. And then when you're ready, you're going to go to whatever gun grab. That's how I'm drilling it. So you and I are pummeling and you're doing cross gun grabs. When you're ready, you grab. I don't see it coming. I have to react off you being on the gun already. And then I go into my drill. So we've changed to doing that probably in the last 4 or 5 years because like, why are we conditioning these bad responses?
It's a very good question. I mean, you get what you get.
We talked about that
back to Fairfax
on our walk to Whole Foods about 2 rounds, finger off the trigger, 2 rounds, finger off the trigger, holstering right away. Is he down yet? Have you even assessed the situation yet? It's a conditioned response that it's 2 rounds of body. People are getting better at going, okay, 4 rounds here, 2 rounds here. But you watch a lot of range training and there's no follow through. What I mean by that is as soon as they fire the last round of what they're giving, finger flies off the trigger. Have they had time to assess if the bad guy's down yet?
Right. I mean, this gets covered quite frequently. I think there's some people that are making a really big deal about that now. However, you see it all the time on, in this body cam footage. So while it's being talked about and there are instructors out there that are doing a really good job around it, the message still isn't getting out, which goes back to how do we get this stuff out there? Yeah. So let's talk about EFC just kind of on the larger scale right now. How many classes are you teaching a year right now? Like what's on the calendar?
So for 2024, we had 36 and that was max capacity for what Jay and my instructor cadre can handle for 2024.
Wow.
Next year, we'll be able to handle more. I'm gone as it is right now. I'm going 3 weeks, basically a month.
That's hard.
And
man.
So I have at least 20 guys that can go lead a course and teach it as good as Jay does. There are still full-time police officers or they're retired and they own gyms. So all my instructors are police officers with police officer experience, brown, black belts in jiu-jitsu or high-level collegiate level wrestling. The exception to that, I have 4 females. 2 of them are black belts that work in 2 large urban departments. My 2 females that aren't black belts are both purple belts. One competes like in ADCC trial. She competes a lot. The other one is a professional fighter.
Oh,
So they're purple belts, but they have other skills but they're both cops.
They're competing.
And they're both cops too. So EFC has a cadre I'm building this cadre, and I want it to be the best in the world, because you're only as good as the team you have.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the toughest things to do, man.
You're only as good as the team you have. And Jay's not great at delegating. Jay's super passionate. Jay wants to be at every course. I want to make relationships with you. I want to make relationships with everybody else. I'm getting better at realizing these guys I put in place for a reason. Okay, the leadership stuff, like, hey, delegate this more. The week of August 12th, we have 3 courses going. Jay can't be at 3 courses.
Is this the first time?
No, we've had numerous courses this year where we've had 2 at the same time.
Got it.
So I have guys that can lead those courses. The problem is I don't have a full-time guy that I can hire yet, because they still have
their full-time jobs,
other jobs.
Yeah.
So I'm working on that. I have a guy that's probably ready to do that, and I can do that by next year. So it's just sacrifice discipline at this time. Mm-hmm. But I want someone that's as passionate for me as me. I want someone that is a high-level martial artist, that is a police officer with above average tactics, because I don't want the product to be watered down.
Diluted, right.
So if you come to an EFC course, all your instructors are going to be cops, and they're all going to have some sort of high-level martial arts. And I would say an overwhelming majority of those cops have a high level of SWAT or tactical team experience as well.
Yeah, so you're talking about high performers.
Correct.
It just in general. I wonder how you're doing this. Like, and you don't have to give me like the secret sauce in the back end. I guess what I'm asking is this because I think this is from a business end, and I've been studying this for quite some time, just kind of across the space in general, but people have a really tough time in scaling business, right?
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. I've been in the coaching business for nearly 30 years now. And the hardest thing to do is to scale yourself or try to provide the same type of continuity. It's not, and when you look at it, I hear what you're saying, like it's really tough to delegate things. It's people, you can look at this a couple different ways, and that's like, oh, the guy's a control freak. You know, he doesn't want to give anybody else his baby. I think that is also probably what makes people successful. So I don't think that's a bad thing. But it's more about being absolutely critical about the maintaining continuity and integrity in the product itself.
100%.
And feeling so passionate and responsible to it that you don't want to put out the thing that is not at the level that the thing should be at. And you can call that control if you want. That's fine. I'm fine if you want to call me a control freak or whatever else. But I also understand it's the toughest thing to do, because this is a very large undertaking. It seems like EFC is moving at breakneck speed. And the only way for you guys to be able to do this is for you to be in all those places all the time for a long amount of time.
I can't outrun my headlights.
For sure.
Right? So could we have put 48 classes on the schedule for this year?
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah. And it would have sucked.
But I'm not going to do that. I want to grow, and I want to grow right. Okay. I want to grow every year. I want to grow right. Do I have guys that can lead blocks without me there? Absolutely. I have 15 or 20 phenomenal instructors. Mm-hmm. Phenomenal instructors. They have limited ability. Not limited ability, I'm sorry. They have limited time off.
Sure.
They have limited time for EFC.
Yeah, I totally get this. Yeah.
And so like, I'm not going, so next week I'm flying home, I'm leaving again Sunday, and I'm going right to Ohio. Then I'm taking the first week of August off, and I got 2 guys going to run that course. Then the second week of August, I have 3 courses. I'm going to Vegas. I'm sending 2 guys to Texas, and I'm sending 2 guys to Michigan.
It's a grind.
And those guys are going to crush the courses. It doesn't change if Jay's there or not Jay there. What I've been doing now, what I want to use 2024 and the beginning of 2025 to do, is get my instructors' faces out there and get them known. Mm-hmm. Jay's not going to put someone in charge of the class unless they can run the class.
But I'm
very picky with how I allow people to run classes.
But the student or the participant needs to believe that. They
Correct.
Need to see that.
Yes. And now, look, let's talk, just say Sheepdog, for instance. Mm-hmm. Tim Kennedy was going to all his courses in the beginning. He doesn't go all his courses now. He can't. His time's in too many different things. He's too important on the back end, doing the marketing, building curriculum. He hired Yako to do all that for him. Now Yako's the face of running that, right? Yako's a 20-year military guy. Okay? I think he won the Combatives program or comp more than anybody else. He's a great guy to put in charge of that. And they see no fall off from that position. Yako called me 2 years ago. He says, Jay, I want to come to a class. Like, okay. Like, I was like, oh, this is great. You know what I said? He goes, because I teach, they teach like they do a protector. They teach protector stuff. They teach some cop stuff, but it's very limited. He goes, but when I teach the cop stuff, I want to know how to articulate and how to do things. It's not my lane. He goes, how much is it going to cost me? And I told him absolutely $0 US. I said, you come to the class you want to. I'll comp you. You come. I can learn from being around that dude.
For sure.
And then I said, but you comp me back to one of your courses when time slows down and Jay has time to go do it. Because then what do I get to do? I get to go be the student. You get the student, yeah. And I get to learn something.
Yeah, this bartering system, if you will, but also the level of professionalism across this and other things, just levels of instruction. I think that is it's starting to become more popular. I think people are, I hesitate with the word like collaborate, but there is a collaboration that needs to happen. And you just mentioned what it is. I don't mean in the instruction,
Correct.
But in the, hey, we're out here trying to do the same stuff, man. And there's a massive piece of pie here, or there's a huge pie here, and there's plenty of room for all of us in this.
Plenty.
Well, there's way more than all of us. So I'm not trying to have it all, and there's no way I could. It's the same for you. So what is it that we could be doing with or for one another in order to advance one another? Because as they say, rising ships, raise all tides, or whatever the thing is. So
you realize quick that, like, as you start becoming successful, you get a lot of haters.
For sure.
Right. And the internet's undefeated. No matter what it is, or who you are, it's every day. And I think it's just, I'm in the mindset now of, I'm worrying about EFC. I'm building EFC. And that's my number one goal and concentration.
Good for you.
And am I willing to help other people out and cross train and do stuff? Absolutely. I mean, that's how you get better. But on the business side of things, and listen, I am a 0 stripe blue belt in business. I am. I'm the curriculum developer. I'm the tactics guy. I'm the teacher. I'm the instructor. The marketing and the business side, Jay's learning. Jay's a blue belt with no stripes on it. That's why we have people in places that are helping us on the business side. Adam's very good in the business side.
Yeah.
But he is a guy that is a partner that is developed multiple successful businesses. And he's not a tactics guy. He's the one that can help us. How do we get better in a business, on the business aspect of sides? Because if we want to get out the best solutions to people, and that is our mission, and that is our goal, and that is our drive and our passion, the business end has to be good too.
So glad you said that.
If the business end isn't good, you're going to be mediocre. Even if you have the best program, you're going to be mediocre. It's not going to get to the reach it needs. And eventually, it's probably just going to fizzle out of something.
Yeah, and you're going to be pissed about it the whole time.
Correct.
Because somebody else out there that's trying to get a black belt in business while being maybe even a blue belt or maybe a purple belt, on the tactics side or the actual coaching side is going to do better than you.
Yes.
And he's going to impact more people than you. And you can call that negative or positive all you want, but at the end of the day, like, where are you putting your time? So I get it. And the quote unquote, I use air quotes, collaboration or spending time with other people, you got to be really careful about and really selective about where you put your time and your energy, man.
Sure, 100%.
Which is why I super appreciate you giving me some. And
I appreciate it back, man.
Coming here, it originally was on short notice. We had this extra week. We mentioned it at the beginning, but coming out here, I mean, the reality of it is I don't think the plane arrived till about 1 a.m. this morning. So it's a long flight, from Oklahoma, I think is where you said you came in from. You're not going to get back until probably tomorrow morning.
9 a.m.
Yep.
Going straight to a soccer tournament.
Yep. To be there with the family and whatever else. And I think that's, I say this all the time, and I hope not to overdo it ever, but the commitment that you're making to spreading the message, and to the people that you're doing that to, is why I do the show. And so I can't thank you enough for for those things. I think just in general, but I also want to thank you for helping me in my journey, not just today, but in general. I've been watching the business grow. I've been watching your message expand, the evolution that it's been taking with the team. And like you mentioned, Adam, I talked to Adam. I got a really good conversation with Adam a couple of weeks back, and really impressed with the level of professionalism that I think exists on the business end of things to put together a quality product and actually be able to deliver to the masses that has longevity. And I think you mentioned that, like it won't fizzle out. And I think there's a lot of lessons that can be learned here. You gave a very, without giving away the playbook, you gave a very well-rehearsed answer to everything that I asked you. And I think that in and of itself, not that it's scripted, that's not what I'm saying. And I think people that are actually have spent time in business and been successful with that know the distinction. And so I'll just leave it at that. Because you have been doing it, you have had the reps, and you do understand what has been successful and hasn't been successful, and how to communicate the message. There's a lot of lessons that I think can be taken from this podcast outside of all the things that we talked about specific to what you do. So that's helped me as well. So I really appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks. And thanks for having us on there. It was amazing. Never been to San Jose itself. I got here at 1 a.m. and I'm leaving today and flying all night, but next time I'll have to stay longer.
Well, at the very least, maybe we can get you out of here and put a decent meal in you before we put you back on the plane. But let's just real quick. I mean, we all have to, obviously, in talking about EFC and what they're doing, where do people go? Where do they find out more about classes, about you, about this cadre of instructors that you're building? If you're still on the search for other good instructors or team members, how do they get in contact with you? What should they do?
Yeah, so efcombatives.com is our webpage. EF Combatives is our IG, which is probably our biggest social media platform right now.
Yeah.
Please check out our YouTube and subscribe to that. We're really trying to grow that for more long-form content for people. That's EF Combatives as well. And then my personal page is WADS BJJ. That's kind of like a backup page for EFC, and kind of like, hey, this is Jay as a person too, not just his professional life on that side of things, right? Like, I'm a normal guy. I'm a person that grew up. I went to college. I went to the academy. I was a police officer, and I just never stopped learning, was passionate and about it. But classes are on the website, and we're always looking for hosts. We are full for 2024. We have 15 classes already booked for 2025.
Outstanding.
So if people are looking at trying to host EFC, email us, and you can email me jay@efcombatives.com, and I'll either take it myself or forward it on to the admin or Joe Sam, who's our full-time sales guy that we ended up having to hire. And, we take marketing and media seriously to the point where we have a social media guy now. Mm-hmm. And that's business stuff that Jay's learning. And it's just like never-ending process of doing such.
Same.
So I look forward to training with anyone that wants to come out. Again, super passionate. I'm at a majority of the classes. I'm not going to be at every class just because as a growing business happens, it's just impossible to do. But I will tell you that I am building a team that is phenomenal. The guys are all passionate. To work for me and to be an instructor, like Adam always says, like you have to pass through Jay's, whatever. And one thing is you have to build relationships with the people we're training.
I love that.
Okay? If you're not building relationships with people, then what are we doing?
Right.
Okay. So like all my instructors build relationships with people. Like, so we're always looking to add to the team. I do have, a full-time position coming up, and I think I have that full, but you never know when there's going to be another one. There are a ton of adjunct availability, which means if you're a super high-level brown, black belt wrestler, and you have cop experience and especially tactics experience on top of the police experience, I'm always willing to sit down for a call. And that may mean, hey, I'm going to comp you to a class. You're going to do some instructor dev. Mm-hmm. Hey, are you good for Jay? Is Jay good for you? I've done that a few times, and like, hey, this guy's a really good teacher and he's a really good martial artist, but he doesn't fit.
It's not the right fit.
He doesn't fit the team. And it's not just if he fits me, he's fit the other guys that are working with, because
that's your responsibility.
They're going to be traveling, and I'm responsible for those guys. Mm-hmm. Right. So like, there's a lot of responsibility for that. And as I get better at delegating, I'm going to need those teams. Right now, My goal is to get at least one instructor regionally, because a lot of my instructors are New York area based to start, because I was running the New York program for so long and still do for the state. But so a lot of those guys are there, but they're time limited availability too. And I'm building this team wider now, and I'm building this team much bigger across the country. And eventually it'll be like, hey, I want a minimum one instructor in every state.
I love that.
Right. So I'm opposed to always taking those. Best way to do that is either email me at j@efcombatives.com or DM me on my personal page. If you DM the EF Combatives page, I look at that, but Sean, who runs that for us, will get that information to me as well. And look forward to meeting and training people and just constantly pushing out good solutions.
I love that. I mean, again, this is not the first time you've thought of that answer. It's not the first time you've given it. I love that. I got one more question.
Sure.
And this is for the new cop, right? Or the young cop, or maybe it's just the one that just hasn't spent much time around this and recognizes, like, I have a gap in my ability and my capability here, and I'm not really sure where to start. Maybe I'm not in a strong culture, or maybe I'm in a very strong culture and it's maybe the word is intimidating, or I'm just not sure how to get in, or it seems very cliquey or something like that, and it's just not my vibe. Going back to the training and kind of starting, and with the specific subject matter that we were talking about today, what do you suggest for them? What are the steps in the process that they should be taking in order to solve their problem?
I think it's a couple of things. First off, like, find that person in the department that you can hang out with that is always looking to be the best they can be in training and tactics. 2, find a gym and start training, okay? Both fitness-wise and jiu-jitsu wrestling-wise. But also find that guy on your department that goes and shoots on a regular basis and start shooting, okay? Because you can start to blend them together. And if you can shoot well and you can fight well, you're going to be hard to beat.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that it's a well-rounded approach to it, and it's the things that people are probably hearing all the time. There's no secret to this. But the most important thing I think that I take away from that is this, the way I look as a learner or somebody that's, again, just even in the podcast, is like, you got to go out and do this. Like, you got to go reach out to people. You got to find people, and you got to make the decision to go do it.
I'll give you an example. I was an FTO, and it was probably like 5 years before I retired. And I wasn't taking like training people anymore, but like if someone was short and the FTO was off, I would take the trainee.
Sure.
And we had this new kid come on. His name was Carter, and he was athletic. He wrestled, I think, through his sophomore year in high school. Okay. And he was a decent shooter already. And I would invite him to jiu-jitsu class. I would invite him to open mats. I would just invite him to the open trainings. And I would take him shooting with me every week. I'd invite him every week when I'd go shoot my minimum round. So every week I had a thing like, I'm going to shoot 50 rounds of handgun, and I'm going to shoot at least 50 rounds at 223.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I started bringing him with me. And then we started doing courses and we started competing. And he ended up becoming one of our SWAT guys. He ended up getting his blue belt. He ended up being a better shooter than me. And he's just a savage. And he became on our SWAT team, became a sniper. He actually left and went to the state police, and they are lucky to have him.
They probably love him.
His goal was to be a full-time SORC guy. And so he got to the level where I was like, okay, I need to go here to do that. And we talked a lot about it. And he asked my opinion. I said, you got to do what's best for you, right? You got to do what's best for you. And if your opportunity to do that is there, then do that. But he was the new guy, and he wanted to be good. What did he do? He hung around with the guys that were training jiu-jitsu. And it wasn't just Jay.
Sure.
It was the guys on the team that were training all the time at jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and the guys going to shoot all the time. It wasn't just me, but he was hanging out with us, and I would kind of like organize most of them. But he started doing that, and now he's working full-time. There's no doubt in my mind he will make that full-time team when he's ready, and when he has his time through that department. But if I'm a new guy, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because he did it, and like, kid's a savage.
I love that. It's not wait for leadership or somebody to come to you to tell you what to do or how to do it. You've got to go figure it out. It's lessons in life. Like I said, Jay, this has been a good time. It was everything I expected and more. I got a lot to think about. There's a lot to unpack. I can't wait to actually listen back to this because there were a lot of pieces in there where I probably wanted to come back, but we were already moving on to the next thing. And I'll probably have a bunch of questions for you. I'll probably have to give you a call or maybe just reserve the right to do this again sometime.
Yeah, I'm open for either.
I appreciate you, man. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks, man.